Let's look at the Glimmer Hot Foil Plate and Stencil Bundle. So this is the Glimmer Hot Foil Background Plate. It is designed to create backgrounds for A2 cards. It is slightly bigger than an A2 card, and as I put a sheet of cardstock, this is cut to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, you can see that this plate is a little bit bigger. Now, we did this intentionally. We did this so that you can create a true background for an A2 card, and so that you have even have a little bit of the background plate, of the background foiling to cut off. You can, of course, use this on smaller cards, but this is designed for A2 cards. Now, this plate can be used alone, and I'll show you that a little later in this video, but it is also designed to work with a coordinating stencil. So there's a set of stencils. There are 4 stencils in that set, and these will help you color most of the sections, most of the images in this plate. The stencils have little holes, and these are there to help you align the stencils and help you position them on your background. If you want to foil the background and then stencil it, I would recommend you start with a larger sheet of paper. So don't start with a piece of paper that is cut strictly to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, because you'll have no room then to do the alignment for the stencil. So start with something bigger. Here I have half a letter sheet of cardstock. This is Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock. It is good paper for hot foil stamping. If you want to use some other types of paper for foiling, you can also use Simon Says Stamp 120 or 130-pound cardstock. That works amazingly well. Now, Spellbinders also has specialty glimmer cardstock. That paper is fantastic for foiling, but it is not good for any sort of coloring or ink blending. So if you want to do the ink blending, skip that paper. So here I'm using the Neenah Solar White 80-pound. I have cut my foil to size. I used my quick trimmer. I find it easier to use a quick trimmer when I'm cutting a large sheet of foil, especially if I need to have a straight edge, and I do need to have a straight edge, although I didn't do a very good job here. My edge is not that straight, it's a little bit crooked. So I cut my foil to size. Again, it's a little bit larger than my plate, but it doesn't matter. You know, I don't need to cut it precisely exactly to the size of my plate because I will be cutting this out later. So it doesn't matter if it's a little bit too big. Now I'm using Best Ever Craft tape from Spellbinders to create a hinge, and I'm also using another piece of tape to tape this plate and also the foil to my paper to make sure everything stays put and that nothing is going to move. My Glimmer hot foil system is nice and hot, so I've placed my paper on the Glimmer, pressed the timer button, and now I'm just waiting for the machine to do its thing to heat up the plate. I also have my Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cutting and embossing machine, and once this is ready, I'm taking it out of the docking station and I'm sending it through the Platinum 6 die cutting machine to apply pressure. This will force the foil to transfer onto my paper. I like to go forward and back, and I usually do this slowly. Some people like to go just forward. Do what works for you. You know, there are different ways to doing hot foil stamping, so just do whatever works for you. This works for me, so that's the method that I stick with. And now that my foiling is done, I'm going to carefully remove that Best Ever Craft tape. I am reusing those pieces, so I'm just going to set those aside. And let's take a look at our background. By the way, that negative piece of foil, I am saving that as well because I can reuse it to create a negative background. Now here's a close-up of this background, and you might notice that there are some imperfections. And you might think, okay, my foil plate did not foil perfectly. No, it did foil perfectly. The way this background plate is designed, it is designed to give you imperfect, artistic, sketched-like results. So this is not problems with your foiling. This is the way this foil plate is designed. This has foiled perfectly. So this is the way it looks. This is the way it's supposed to look. So you have a beautiful, beautiful background. Now I also foiled this in several other colors of foil to show you a comparison, you know, to show you different things that you can do. So this was foiled with the Spellbinders Champagne foil. I really love this foil color. Now this background, I already stenciled this one. This one was foiled on the Simon Says Stamp 130-pound cardstock using the matte gold foil. This one was foiled on the Simon Says Stamp black glossy cardstock using that same matte gold. I'm not really a fan of the regular gold foil. I find it to be too flashy. So matte gold is probably my top favorite foil color. Now this is the Spellbinders Glacier cardstock, and this was foiled in opaque white. I love it. It's very subtle. This was foiled on Neenah Solar White 80 pound using one of these Spellbinders pastel foils from a 4-pack. Love that too. And then this last one I did tone on tone. So this is the Spellbinders brushed black cardstock, and I used the opaque black foil. Here I have the regular black and the opaque black, and I really like the opaque black. I'm not as much a fan of the regular black because the regular black foil is like the regular gold foil. It's kind of too flashy. So it's too flashy for me, it's too shiny for me. So the matte black, that's my choice. That's my preferred black foil. And I also have another background where I foiled the same design on Neenah Solar White 80 pound in matte black. Okay, let's take a look at the stencils. So here I have the 4 stencils. I've already aligned them. As I tilt them in the light, I can sort of see through all of 4 layers. You can see a little bit of that. So I can see through all 4 layers to make sure they're all aligned. And I have my dots there. We designed these stencils to make it very easy for you to align them and position them in your background. So what you need to do is you need to take one layer, any layer, doesn't matter what layer it is. Here I have a layer with the berries. Position and align that layer on your background. Tape it down using your best ever craft tape. So here I'm just adding 2 pieces of tape, one at the top and one at the bottom. Next, use your pencil and draw a line or draw a dot in those circle openings. So draw 1 dot at the top and 1 at the bottom. And then I also like to outline the corners using the pencil. You don't need to do the corners, but I find it helps. So once you do that, you'll be able to align the next layers easily. Now, to do my ink blending, I like to use various size blending brushes. So here I'm starting with the berries, and the berries are very small. So I'm using the Simon Says Stamp detail brushes. I have a round brush, and I'm using that to apply my light color. So I also have 2 colors of ink, and for each layer, I prefer to use 2 colors of ink. So there is a little bit of color variation. It's not just one solid layer of color. And I also try to ink blend so that there is sort of like an ombre effect. I have my color concentrated on one end, but it fades almost into white. So that's the way I like to blend. I feel it looks better this way. You absolutely can do a solid layer of color, and that also looks cool and interesting in some cases. But for this background, I envisioned it with a sort of like an ombre type blending. So I'm using a small, or I guess this is a detail round brush from Simon Says Stamp to ink blend my base color, and this is the light red. I do have the colors that I use for this background listed in the video description below, along with all of the other supplies, but I encourage you to use what you have. You don't need to use these exact colors. I'm sure you already have something cool in your stash that you can apply to this background. Next, I have a Simon Says Stamp flat detail blending brush, and I'm using that to add shading to the berry. So here I'm coming in with a darker red. This is lipstick red, and I'm just adding a little bit of that darker red to one side of my berries to help make them look a little bit more dimensional. So by using 2 colors of ink or 2 shades of one color, you're creating color variation and you're adding dimension to your image. It doesn't look flat. It looks dimensional. It looks a little bit curved, and that makes it interesting. That creates visual interest on your background. Now let's remove this layer, and look how easy. We have the berries blended. The stencil protected the rest of the background, so we didn't get the ink anywhere else on the background. So it's nice and easy. I'm going to position my next layer, and look how easy that is. I'm just using these registration marks, the pencil marks that I made when I was aligning the first layer, and I can quickly position the second layer onto my paper. Now from here, you basically use whatever colors of ink you like to ink blend each of the leaves. So each stencil layer will blend a separate type of ink. So you'd basically just need one shade or one color of ink for each stencil layer. So here I have Aspen and Pine ink colors from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm just going to use those to ink blend those leaves. And again, I am working with the smaller blending brushes to make sure that I have more control when I'm applying the ink. Now, my ink blending is very directional. I like to rotate my stencil, rotate my paper to apply the ink. I feel I have more control when I do this, and it's just a lot easier for me. I like the result much better when I'm rotating the paper versus having the paper stay put in one place. So again, I ink blended the base using the lighter shade of ink, and then I used a different blending brush, and I came in with a darker ink color to add some shading at the base of the leaves. I'm not going to show you the entire blending process because I'm sure you don't want to sit here and watch me blend ink on paper, so I'm just going to speed through this, but you get the general idea. So pick whatever colors of ink you like, and again, these don't even have to be red and green. You can be artistic, you can be creative and use some other colors. So I removed that second stencil layer. I'm positioning the third layer, and again, this was very easy to do. And next, I have my next ink colors. I first started to blend this with the wrong ink color. I realized this was not the color I wanted to use for the holly leaves, so I switched to a different color, and I'm now blending the holly leaves with a much darker green. Again, I'm adding the darker shade at the base of the leaves to add color variation, and my third layer of leaves is done. We just have one more layer to do. Now there are 4 different leaves in this background, but we have 3 stencil layers for the leaves. So one leaf ends up being free from blending. So not every image here has a stencil to blend it. And again, this is intentional. I didn't want to have every leaf blended. I wanted some of the elements kept free from ink blending. So that's the reason why there are only 4 layers to this background. Here's what it looks like once the ink blending is finished. And I don't know about you, but I absolutely love this. And this really did not take long to make. It only took me about 10 minutes to ink blend this background. If I were to use coloring mediums to color it, it would have taken me much longer. And by the way, I do have an example of a background colored using Copic markers that I will show you just to, compare the 2 different types, the 2 different ways of how you can color this background. Now, if you want to have that last leaf colored, you can absolutely color it using, again, a Copic marker or something like that. So you don't have to keep it blank. You don't have to leave it blank if you don't want to. You can use a coloring medium to color it. The way I designed these stencils, they will once again give you a very sketchy, a very artistic look to your background. The stencils are not designed to fill the shapes entirely. They fill the shapes partially, artistically, creatively, to give you that beautiful, unique look. If you want to fill your shapes completely, if you want to color the entire shape, the stencils do not give you that option. The stencils will only help you add color to sections of each shape. Now, next we need to cut this background out, and you can either use a rectangle die to cut it out or use your paper trimmer and just trim it to size, and that's exactly what I did. So the coordinating stencil, layering stencil set makes it very easy to add color to the foiled background. But you don't have to get the stencils if you don't want to. Maybe you are not into ink blending. Maybe you just want the background foil plate as is. It does look beautiful as is without any coloring. But you can also color the foiled background using coloring mediums. Now, I first tried to match the colors of the coloring to the colors of the ink blending, just to show you the 2 different versions side by side. And like I said, because I'm using coloring medium, because I'm using markers, I now can fill the shapes completely. So I'm filling each of the berries. I will also fill each of the leaves, and I will fill those shapes completely without any white spaces left on my background. Now, if you do this, you can also add color to your background, and you'll see me do that. I will use a black marker and I will turn this background black. So the background will just pop. Everything, the colored images will just pop here. So I used the red markers to color the berries. And again, I used a lighter red and a darker red to add some shading and some dimension to my berries. I next came in with some green markers. I used a combination of Olo markers and Copic markers to color the holly leaves green. So I don't have a very dark Copic green, dark green Copic marker. So I used my darkest Olo marker to lay down the shadows. And then I used Copic markers, some lighter green shades of Copic markers to color the rest of the leaf. Now here are the two backgrounds side by side. So I have the ink blended leaf, and it's ink blended in similar colors of ink, and a Copic colored leaf. See how it looks? And with a colored leaf, I colored it completely. I don't have any white areas on the leaf. I kept on using my alcohol markers, both Olo markers and Copic markers, because these do work together. They're both alcohol, so you can use Olos with Copics and vice versa. So I kept on using the markers to color the rest of the background. Not going to show you the entire coloring process. Again, I'm just going to speed through this because I'm sure you don't want to watch the whole process. It was quite lengthy. It did take me a lot longer to color the background using markers versus color the background using stencils. When you use your markers, you do have more control over the finished image because, well, the markers have much finer tips compared to blending brushes. So, of course, you have a lot more control over how and where you apply the color and the ink. So, if you want to really take your time and create a masterpiece with this foiled background, you absolutely can. So, if you are into coloring, you have that option. You can take your time and really color it. If you are not into coloring, that's why we did the stencil set, to give you the ability to color the background with ease, so you don't have to stress about all the different colors of markers, all of the shading and blending and all of that. So here are the two backgrounds side by side. One is ink blended, one is colored. They look very similar, except for the fact that the colored background has all of the shapes filled. Now I then went ahead and colored that last leaf, and you can see how it looks compared to the ink blended background. Now I have several card ideas for you to share because I have already made a bunch of cards. You can also see some of them on the Spellbinders website. So here for this first card, I used one of the ink blended backgrounds. I trimmed it down slightly. So this is 4 1/4 by probably 5 inches. I foam mounted the trimmed background over an A2 top folding card base, and I added a simple sentiment down at the bottom, and it says, "Hoping your holiday season is filled with joy." So it's just a super simple card. You have a colorful background, you have a simple foiled sentiment, and it's done. Not hard to make at all. And you can probably even mass produce this type of card if you are looking to do so this holiday season. Now, this next card, this is the one where I did the black background. So this was colored using the combination of Copic markers and Olo markers. So it's all completely colored. And then I used the black marker for the background. I love the drama on this card. I love the bold colors, the bright colors, the vibrant colors. Like, this is very me. This is the type of card that I enjoy making the most, where there is a ton of contrast. I trimmed this background to 4 inches wide by 5.5, and I foam mounted it over an A2 card base. So there is a little bit of white space on both sides. And then I also foiled one of the sentiments on red cardstock, and I used matte gold foil to match the color of the foiling on the background. And the sentiment reads, "Sending you the very best wishes for a joyful holiday season." And again, I love the way this looks. So this is a look at the Holly Glimmer hot foil background plate and coordinating layering stencils. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have found it useful. Thanks so much for spending time with me today. I cannot wait to see what you guys will create. As always, tag me on social media if you ever share your projects. I'd love to see them. Love you, and I'll see you next time.